Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Okay, so Jiffy, welcome to the Rad Dad Show. Who are you?
I'm kind of nobody after watching. I mean, not now confused. Now after listening to many episodes of the show, I'm like, how did I even get on this show? Like, I mean, I've been playing music for years, and I don't know. I'm a lifelong skateboarder, and I'm a 7-year dad. But yeah, you tell me. Who am I?
Well, that's why you're on the show. You check all the boxes. You play rock music, you skateboard, and you're a dad. So, in my opinion, those are some of the things that you need to be on your resume in order to be a rad dad. Um, so, Jiffy Marx band, who are you playing with these days?
I play in a few different projects, but my most recent release would be Autogramm's sophomore release, No Rules, which came out. When did that come out? A couple of months ago now. I should know this. Mid-April, I guess. So only a month ago. But we've been releasing singles all year, and yeah, we're not touring obviously because of just like everyone else. We're kind of stuck at home because of COVID, but yeah, we're pretty excited about the release, and people seem to be responding to it, which is great.
That's right. We'll talk more about that. Let's get the rad dad questions out of the way. Do you consider yourself a rad dad?
I guess I do, but I don't. I've listened to the podcast, and I'm not sure if I think that being a rad dad is like a good or a bad thing. But just like you said, I mean, I think like being a skateboarder and like a semi-professional musician is like a pretty radical thing, as in like compared to my parents, who are relatively conservative, and like they're like baby boomer parents. They had 2.5 kids, and like my dad worked, my mom she worked, but she was also kind of like more the homemaker. So like I would say I'm a rad dad in that I'm not really I'm not what I would consider a traditional dad. But actually, having listened to whatever, like 5 or 6 episodes of the Rad Dads podcast, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm not so radical. I'm just like all these other guys.
That's why you're here. That's why that's kind of like the light that we want to shed, onto people. It's just really an opportunity to kind of you know, be proud of what you do and kind of give yourself and we'll give you a pat on the back as well. But
Right.
The whole kind of, I guess, impetus to the show is to try to interview dads that inspire us in some way, and we have a strong affinity and love for music, punk music. It just doesn't have to be punk music, just anything that deals with something that's creative. And so the hope is people listen to this and kind of get inspired to maybe create a band on their own, go start a band, the old big boys kind of thing, like that punk ethos. And so that's why you're here. So knowing that a little bit, like, would you change your answer? Can you expand on that answer?
On the rad, whether I'm a rad dad?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely consider myself a rad dad. I'm just like I was saying, I don't necessarily think that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, when I'm off touring with my band, like maybe that I could be more present, but at the same time, like I've never had, or sorry, not never. Since my daughter was born, I haven't had a 9 to 5 job. So because I want to be more present in her life, and none of my bands tour. Like Autogramm tours the most, and we don't tour that much. So I would say I'm still a relatively present. I mean, I make an exception of trying to be as present as I can. Try to share as much of the parenting responsibilities as I can, and I think that can be kind of rad too, because my dad, as much like he loves me just as much as I love my daughter, but his way of parenting was more to like be working all the time so that he could provide for his family, whereas for me, I'm like, I mean, not to say that I don't make an effort to provide for my family, but I just try to make a real effort to like be around and spend as much time with my daughter as I can, just so that she I hope that she appreciates that.
Right. Is that something you're very cognizant of like, okay, my dad, you kind of said he wasn't really there, but he provided and he worked a lot. And so is that something
Yeah,
you were
it's something
cognizant about? But like, I'm like, I kind of want to be like my dad and be a provider, obviously, but I want to be there more. Or is
I
that
think
just
it,
you?
for sure. Yeah, I think I definitely think about that in that, like I think my dad who had a really close relationship with his dad, they weren't, my dad's parenting style, I think, was in a way reactionary to his parents in the same way that my parenting style is a reaction to my parents. But like, it doesn't, like, I think my family, like my parents are still together. Um, and I think that has influenced me a lot. And yeah, I just think that we might have different styles, but it all comes from like a very loving place. Like all of those different parenting styles and styles of being a dad come from a very loving place. So at the same time, it's like I'm consciously being a different dad than my dad was, in the same way that he probably was, from contrasting the way that his dad was for him. But it's coming from a very loving place for sure. It's not like a rebellion. It's more of a like, well, I'm going to take what he taught me and like kind of tweak it for my own tastes and interests, I guess.
Right. Nice. Cool. What's the most rewarding aspects of being a dad?
Well, I know you're a dad. I mean, it's kind of I'm not sure if I have a really like original answer. I think, I feel like making my daughter laugh is like a huge thing for me. Making her just, I try to not spoil my daughter, but at the same time, like it's hard not to, because like that, like making her happy is like, that is like, makes me happy, so that's kind of like it's almost like like an addiction or something. You got to really like kind of keep in mind, like, you don't want to spoil them, you don't want to give them everything, but at the same time, like, you do want to give them everything, because like making them happy is like such a pleasure. I mean, it's yeah, I think like that's the most rewarding thing, is having like a happy, well-adjusted child. So again, I think that's like kind of my parenting style, is sort of trying to be there and make her happy without spoiling her.
How do you do that? That's like super interesting. I kind of feel that the dichotomy there. I'm with you. That's like I have one son. So his
It's
mom
kind
and I are separated, but we co-parent really well, and we both provide, and we
of, oh,
have
that's a
we have
whole nother, like
good
my,
jobs, and we can almost buy him anything, really, like within reason. But
yeah, for sure. That's kind of something I never really realized, or I don't, not me. I think everyone probably realizes when they're a kid, your parent might be like, "Oh, I can't buy you that toy because it's too expensive." But it's like, like a toy compared to a car isn't really, like a couple $100 is not more than a couple nights out for dinner or whatever. But it's this whole thing of like, if you literally gave your kid everything they wanted, not only would they kind of maybe be a spoiled brat, but your house would be full of crap, which I know like that definitely doesn't fly with my wife, who does sort of have a different style. Like, like I collect records. So I'm already like, if my daughter wants like a new toy, I'm usually like, yeah, sure. Like, if I'm going to buy myself a record, I can't say you can't have a new toy or whatever. But I try to limit my record collecting in the same way that I limit like my drinking or, that kind of thing. The whole like everything is good in moderation sort of idea.
right, I collect records. That's like struck a nerve with me too. It's like, okay, I like I have a record collection that's I'm a big SNFU fan, and so I have some records that are worth quite a bit of money, and I've spent a lot of money on a record. So sometimes
Right.
like, okay, how can I justify buying this $100 record and not buying my my son the $10 or $20 Lego set?
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. Okay.
That's a good example. Like for me, it's like I actually like Lego too. Like that's something that my daughter and I do together. So when I buy her a Lego set, it's really as much for me as it is for her. It's like if I buy a record that my wife likes, it's like I'm more likely to buy a record that my wife likes because then she's going to want to listen to it and is not going to be like, oh, you bought another record, you know, like I don't know.
It's an experience, right? With like the Lego set, or like even like buying a puzzle, you know, like I've done some puzzles with my son. It's the same sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a relatively cheap form of entertainment, and you know, especially in these COVID times, it's hard to find things to do. Well, maybe with the weather changing, it'll change. But you know, being in Canada,
I know what you mean, though. We sort of we have always discouraged. We've really tried to limit screen time, so we don't like. She doesn't have like a video game console, so that's not like a thing. You know, like she's not like, can I get the newest video game? Because we don't like. We have never bought her a game on her iPad. She only has an iPad because it's my old iPad kind of thing. Like we let her use like maybe once a day to watch like a cartoon on Netflix or whatever. But we do try to really limit her screen time, which I think is a trade-off of like, I'd rather buy her, like you said, a puzzle or a Lego set than put that into like, a video game, I suppose.
Why do you limit? Like, this is a kind of a topic that's come up a few times in a bunch of the interviews. Like, I'm just curious to your own opinion. Like, why do you limit the screen time?
I mean, it's a hard thing. Like, I feel like I was actually addicted to TV when I was a kid, and I'm not now. Like, I barely watch. It's not like we spend a bunch of time watching stuff on the internet and don't let our daughter do it. Like, you know, we might each spend like a half hour a day watching something on Netflix. Whereas when I was a kid, I would watch like hours of TV. I would like right up until, I don't know, I was a young adult. So I do think there's some addiction issues with that. Because I mean, it's coming from my personal experience. But even seeing it in my daughter, like sometimes when we tell her she has to turn, like, you know, she watches one show and we're like, okay, time to turn the computer off. She'll get like, you know, visibly upset. And it's like, okay, like this is kind of why we're limiting it, because you have such like stopping watching it causes you so much anxiety that can't like be a good thing, you know?
I agree. I'm a school teacher, and so I deal with, you know, students on their phones all the time, and I see that. So I'm just always curious.
Like I said, my daughter's 7, so it's not a huge issue now. But I can see like when she's in high school, like I don't know what we'll do, but well, you know, we're kind of figuring it out as we go, right?
Exactly. That's what we do as parents. In what ways has fatherhood changed you?
Well, I definitely. I go out a lot less, but with COVID now I'm kind of like, you know, it's that you don't know what you got till it's gone. I feel like I almost was using having a kid as an excuse not to go out. And now that I can't, now that there's nowhere to go, you know, like going to shows, like I spent my whole life going to shows, but then when I had a kid, I wasn't going to as many shows. I mean, I was playing a lot of shows. So that's always sort of a thing. Like, I actually not sure if you play in a band, but like, when you play in a band and you're playing whatever, like 20 shows in a row, you don't necessarily want to then spend the 21st day going to see another show. You kind of want to like hang out and read a book, you know, like just because it's sort of different than what you normally do. But I feel like I was using having a kid. I feel like parents sometimes, like rad dads sometimes use their kids as like, oh, I can't go out because like I got to whatever, like I got a kid. And it's like, yeah, man, you're just like kind of using that as an excuse to not go do something awesome. And I'm, especially now that there's nothing happening, I'm like, oh man, like not only did I miss some shows that I should have probably gone to, but like I could have gone to shows that I maybe weren't even that good, but like, you know, like I said, like now that there's no shows to go to, I'm just like, oh man, like I'm dying to go to a show. I would literally go see any band, even if it wasn't a band that I liked, just to see live music.
Yeah, it's tough. you know, we have a lot of musicians on this show, and I play in a cover band, but it's nothing. It's just kind of for fun, nothing crazy like touring or anything by any means. But I, yeah, a large part of my existence is going to shows, and like that was my hobby really. And yeah, it's been tough. It's tough. What would be, you know, if there was a show that any show you could go to tomorrow, what would it be? Who would you see?
Oh man, I mean, I hate those whole like desert island records things. Like I said, I mean, I'm a record collector, so it's like I think I'm in. We just moved, so I think I've got my record collection like under 1,000 records right now, which is like the least amount I've had in like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years or whatever. Like I've never gotten rid of this many records since I started collecting records, and I'm feeling pretty good about it, to be honest with you. But I still like. I listen to a lot of different music, and I like to, you know, like I'm not the kind of person who just like only listens to one thing. But yeah, I don't know. Wait, I don't want to not answer your question. Is this like any band that ever existed, or a band that actually I would have a possibility of seeing?
No, yeah, I'm no anyone, any band, yeah, live dead.
And I mean, I would have to say the Ramones, just because, you know, there's no way we're ever gonna get the chance to see them again. I did see them like back in '92. I don't know how old you are, but like, do you remember they played Infest in just outside of?
That is my biggest regret in my life.
Oh yeah.
I remember my friend Jay and Aaron coming to my house. I was in grade 11, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to Infest." I'm like, "I have no money," and I wasn't like a big camper kind of guy. Like, I just didn't like. They're like, "Oh, we'll pay for everything." Like, I'm like, "I don't have a tent or anything." "Oh, we got a tent. You could come with us." I'm like, I'm just trying to make all of these excuses not to go.
Man, talking about I made too many excuses
Oh,
for
and
not going. Now I'm like, man, why? I lived in New York City for a couple, not New York City. I lived in Brooklyn for a couple of years, and you know, I went out to bars all the time, but I just wasn't like at the time. I wasn't that into going to shows. And I mean, the problem with living in New York is like every night there's like 10 shows. So I mean, you have not only like you have to like plan in advance and decide which one you're going to. And for me, it was just like overwhelming, you know, like I hate going to a restaurant that has like a 6-page menu, you know, like I just want to have like 3 choices. Yeah. So, I mean, and I feel like that really does sort of go back to like this, like growing up in Calgary, there would be 1 or 2 shows a week, and we would go to every show because it didn't matter who was playing. There was only 1 or 2 shows. So you just went. Like it was like, if you wanted to see live music and like hang out away from your parents, like that's what you did, right? So so that's definitely like what I miss. But yeah, to answer your question, I think like probably like if I had a chance to see any band, it would probably be the Ramones.
That's a good show. That would be mine. Would be up there.
I mean, you know, I did see the Buzzcocks right before Pete Shelley passed away, which was awesome. And I'm glad that was a show that I'm glad I did go to. I mean, I never saw them back in the day. I'm not that old, but yeah, I would definitely put them maybe on that list too, since yeah, Pete Shelley's no longer with us, and he's definitely a huge influence for me.
Sweet. What are some of the traits you think make one a rad dad?
Oh man, I don't know. Like I said, I think I do sort of identify as one, but don't necessarily think it's like a good or bad thing. You know, like I took my daughter to see The Descendants when she was like less than 1 year old, just so that I could tell people that she saw The Descendants when she was a baby. You know, like is that good parenting? No, I don't think so. But is it rad? Yes, pretty rad. And like she's been skateboarding since like I had her on a skateboard before she could stand. Like I would like wheel her around, like hold her up and wheel her around the house. You know, like I don't know. That's again, I don't think that's like good parenting. Like there's a possibility she could have hurt herself, but I wasn't like, you know, throwing her down the ramp or anything. But you know, it's that kind of stuff. It's like I think doing kind of like, you know, doing abnormal things. Like I think being weird is the best, you know, like I don't I don't ever want to be like identified as being normal. So like whatever the opposite of normal is for like parenting, like, you know, playing catch with your kid. Like I'd rather like wheel my daughter around on my skateboard. Even, you know, this is of course before she had the freedom of choice of picking stuff for herself. Like now that she's kind of has her own opinion, I don't push it too much, you know, because like I don't want her to reject it just because I'm pushing her into it. I still give her like the option of like listening to my music or going skateboarding, but like, you know, I basically kind of like try to not push her too hard in my direction, you know. I'd rather her find that herself.
That's exactly how I feel. I think it's almost one of the reasons maybe why I started Rad Dads is this idea of like, I don't like as you said, kind of like the not normal thing. Like, you know, I guess the alternative, for lack of a better word, the alternative kind of thing. I grew up skateboarding. I grew up in the like punk culture. Grew up going to shows like, you know, at the Bronx Sunday afternoon. That would be like a thing almost weekly. Like, and I guess I learned so much from that scene, and I have a different worldview because of skateboarding, a different worldview because of punk rock, and I'm super grateful for that upbringing. That I kind of want to share that with my kids. So I don't know. I just wanted to share that. That's how I feel. But now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, like, yeah, he's not really into my music. That's okay though. I want him to have passions and follow. Did you have any fears about becoming a dad?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I mean, I still do. I still, you know, I kind of look forward to my daughter growing up, but at the same time, I'm totally afraid for her. Like, I think I was a very reluctant parent to begin with because, you know, I see the world, and this is like very much influenced by like growing up as like a punk rock, you know, kid and then adult. You see the world through pretty, you see the world through pretty negative, like a pretty negative viewpoint. I mean, and I still believe that. Like, I believe that the world's a pretty fucked up place. So like to bring another person into a world, and it's, you know, look at where things are right now. Like I don't feel like I'm wrong about that. Like the world is not in the greatest state that it's ever been. It's not necessarily getting better every day. So to bring a human being into that, like I did have some pretty major reluctances, but I mean, you know, and any parent knows, like there's nothing like it, you know, like there's nothing, like there's no love like the love for your kid. So I mean, as selfish as that is, like it's a pretty amazing experience. And you know, we can always hope that our kids save the world, right?
Well, yeah, that was kind of maybe my follow-up question or comment about the idea of like, you know, so it's a conversation I have with friends and just in my brain, I guess, like punk, when you see that word punk and like punk rock, to you, what would be like, what would you say to someone when you said, okay, describe punk rock to them?
I mean, punk rock is probably not just one thing. Like I think punk rock is like in some ways a fashion statement. Like it kind of started like, you know, British punk partially started with like the Sex Pistols, which came literally out of like a fashion boutique, you know, like the whole like mohawks and like safety pins, which like I'm still totally into that. Like I love punk fashion, as well as like, you know, like look at streetwear, which is like a major fashion movement, basically came out of 90s skateboarding, which was like my teenage, you know, years, like the years that I developed as a human being, like became conscious of the world. So like, and sorry, my mother also and my wife are both in fashion. So like that side of it definitely still means something to me, even though the other, you know, like the other side of me is like, no, like punk rock is like an attitude. It's more like skateboarding where it's like, it's not about, you know, it's not about being on a team and like, and winning and going to the Olympics. It's about like trying your best and like doing something like super gnarly and not giving a fuck if you like hurt yourself, or like, you know, not even, maybe you never land a trick, but you're still going to try it. That kind of thing. Like, that's pretty punk rock. Like, just like going for it. I mean, and that is for me, you know, like, I'm a 45-year-old, like, not very successful musician. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I have zero interest in becoming famous. Like I said, I don't even know why I was asked to be on this podcast, although I'm very grateful that I was. I'm still just a bit confused how, like, you even have heard of heard of any of the music that I put out, because, you know, none of it is like been on the radio or whatever. I mean, you know, it's on like college radio, but you know what I'm saying? It's not, I wasn't in Pennywise or the Descendants, that's for sure. And, you know, like, maybe when I was younger, that was like what I was striving for. But even then, like, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be in Pennywise and the Descendants, but those bands weren't like playing these festivals to like millions of people. They were playing to like 50 to 100 kids at a bar on a Sunday afternoon, you know?
Yeah.
And that, you know, still, like, that's, to me, that's what I'm striving for. I'm striving to be in a band that, like, you know, people can go, like 100 or 200 people will go see, and maybe like sell like 1,000 or 5,000 copies of our record or whatever. But like, I don't give a crap about like making money or being famous. Like, I don't know if I was ever that, I don't think I was ever interested in that side of it. Like, for me, I just love to play and write music, and yeah, I just can't stop. So I've just basically had to kind of like cater my life to it.
Yeah. So going kind of back to like the punk thing, like, so do you find that there's hope in punk music, and like that kind of trickles into your parenting?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. Is there hope in punk music? There is, I think.
I guess the message of hope.
I mean, like, I'm a huge sucker for like power pop and pop punk, a lot of which is like focused on like, you know, like love songs, you know, like, I'm still a total sucker for like a good love song. And I think there's, you know, like, what has more hope than a love song? Like, even like a rejected love song still has like a hope for like the, you know, the future or whatever. More so than just saying like, oh man, like I was saying, like, a punk song that's like, fuck the world, like, the world's totally going to shit. Which isn't, you know, that's the other side of it. You know, it's kind of like, there's not just one version of punk, I guess, is sort of what I was getting at.
Just maybe like there's not one version of parenting.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable talking about the relationship with your dad?
With my dad, yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of touched on it already. Like, I have a really close relationship with my dad, although, and I totally think my relationship with him has informed my like parenting, but at the same time, like, I can honestly say, like, I'm making a conscious effort to like not be totally like, I want to focus as much of my time with my daughter as I can, because I don't want to like kind of like miss her growing up, kind of thing. And I mean, I hate to, like, you know, I think my dad might actually see this or hear it, and I don't want him to think that I resent anything that he ever did. That's kind of where I'm at with my parenting. It's like, I totally am taking what he showed me, which is like, you know, just like this sort of undying love and wanting to like want the best for your kids. I just like have a different, just like you said, there's not just one way of doing that, I think. You know, and I'm not like, I would never criticize anyone's parenting style, even if it's not like, I wouldn't say anyone's parenting style is the same, right? And I'm not going to say mine is better than yours. I'm just going to say it's different.
Yeah, and that's what I find on the show too. Like, you know, it's more just kind of a curiosity of mine. You know, why I ask these questions, and it's been interesting to me of all the interviews that we've done, that there's these themes that just kind of come out of these questions, and it's just, to me, I don't know why, but it's totally interesting, and you touched on some of them. So brag about the new record, and what's kind of the future of Autogramm and your projects and other things over this
Yeah,
time.
I've really been trying. I definitely miss like playing with other people, like the whole. I mean, I know. Sorry, I know your question wasn't COVID oriented, but it's hard to not sort of bring that into it. It's been quite a bit over a year since the last time I played live. One of my bands, my sort of more punk rock band, Jiffy Marx, that's just like kind of like all my homies getting together once a week to like bash out some tunes. We jammed a little bit last summer when it seemed safe, but you know that I think that only even lasted like a month or two. But we were making like a bunch of demos, just like all recording at home, like sending the tracks back and forth, and then my best friend and I basically we wrote 30 songs and recorded them in our practice space last summer, which that's coming out on a couple tapes this summer. Actually, it's being partially released by a label out of Calgary. Another Alberta connection there for you.
Sweet. What label?
Debt Offensive. And that band is called Night Court. It's not even, we've never jammed. We've only recorded because it was started during we started kind of like I said, just sending tracks back and forth digitally. And then when it was safe for a couple months to actually be in the same room, we like DIY recorded like 30 songs. So that stuff's coming out on 2 tapes this year. Last year I released my first solo single. That came out in the fall. And then, yeah, the new Autogramm just came out this year. And yeah, so I mean, I've been doing as much music as I can, but I gotta say, I definitely miss like the traditional, like, I mean, yeah, I miss like playing with people for sure. And I like going to see bands. I miss that as much as I miss playing, I think, which is crazy because like I said, I wasn't even really going out that much before COVID.
What made you put out a record during COVID?
Oh man, I don't know. The single, the first record I put out, which was the single, almost sort of felt like a bit of a mistake. I just like some records were doing really well because people were home. They didn't have, they were getting like they were getting their COVID checks or whatever they're called, and like buying stuff online. So there was some people who were like doing really well, but I know most people I know, like most of the labels I've talked to and other bands, like I don't think anyone's really like benefiting from COVID much. So it's been weird. Autogramm is like definitely a democracy between the 3 members, and we just figured like we started recording it like almost a year before COVID hit. It was almost done recorded, like we were almost finished recording when COVID hit. So if we waited another year, it would be like 3 years old. Like we will have written another record by then. So that one would make more sense. That one made more sense to put it out. Even though we can't tour, we're just like we're actually trying to make more videos. Like we're not even living in the same cities anymore. Well, 2 of us have been living in the same city, and our drummer is now living in Chicago. So we wouldn't even be jamming, even if we like were allowed to be in the same room. We would be touring for sure, but so instead of touring, we're just trying to make more videos, which is just kind of fun. Like I don't think anyone watches videos, but it's fun for us as a band to like do something creative, right?
Right, exactly. Especially these times, right? When access to those activities that you usually do tend not to. Last question. Any fatherly words of wisdom to any of the rad dads out there?
Oh, I don't know. I I've heard you ask this to several people, and I kind of tried to like come up with something, but I don't know. I don't feel like I've been a dad long enough to really impart that much wisdom. I usually tell people, like for a new dad, you know, because I've been a dad long enough that I feel like I can I don't know if it's advice, but I can like warn a new dad that, like, you know, if you're expecting a child, I would say like try to get as much sleep as you can, because those first few months are like pretty rough. Like for, you know, I'm talking about a first kid, of course. I only have one, so I'm actually not really sure what it is like having another kid. I've heard is kind of easier, but I wouldn't know because I don't have one. But yeah, having that first few months was pretty tough. It's a bit of a shock to the system, so I would probably warn someone of that. And even like the first 3 years, I think for me were a bit of a blur. And you know, I mean, sounds like I do mean it pretty tongue in cheek, but it like it does get better. Like it definitely that from that like the shock of having your first child, it definitely is like it goes way uphill once they start like walking and talking and like having their own like feelings, and like, yeah, it's pretty awesome, as you know.
It is. Thank you so much for your time, Jiffy. Appreciate the chat.
Thanks again for having me, man. It's really is. I would go as far as to say I'm honored. So I really like the podcast. Keep it up.